I'm Daniel James, and you're listening to 7am. In 2022, Masha Alyokhina escaped Russia disguised as a food delivery courier. She had spent years being arrested, imprisoned, and watched by the state for her work with punk protest group Pussy Riot and for speaking out against Vladimir Putin. But Alyokhina says the Russia she fled wasn't transformed by one dramatic moment. Repression came piece by piece until fear, censorship, and eventually silence became part of everyday life. Now she says the same pattern is taking hold elsewhere as people become overwhelmed, disengaged from politics, and complacent that the freedoms they inherited will simply endure. Today, Pussy Riot's Masha Alyokhina on what Putin's Russia can teach us about authoritarianism and why democracy can never be taken for granted. It's Friday, August 21. Masha, hello and welcome to 7am. You're here in Australia right now, and it's been several years since you left Russia. To begin with, could you tell us about why you left Russia?
I crossed the border with Europe 28th of April of 2022. I never wanted to leave my country, but I decided to do that because Putin started a full-scale war against Ukraine, which is still going for 5th year.
It was as sudden as it was brutal and relentless. Ukrainians woke up to find themselves plunged into the midst of war. Explosions and air raid sirens ringing out here in Kyiv and cities across this country as Russia launched a full-scale invasion on multiple fronts in the early hours of this morning.
I left Russia to help the country which is suffering from the army of my country. I was under second in my life criminal case. I had an electronic monitoring bracelet on my leg. I didn't have a passport because it was confiscated during the police search. The criminal case was opened because I wrote an Instagram post in support of Alexei Navalny, Russian oppositional leader who was poisoned by Russian Secret Service, FSB, arrested in the airport, imprisoned, tortured for 3 years and then killed.
News that the most prominent opposition leader in Russia, Alexei Navalny, has died suddenly in prison, according to the country's prison service.
Post-mortem tests by Britain, France, Germany, Sweden and the Netherlands conclusively found the presence of ibaptidine, a deadly neurotoxin.
Back then, nobody knew that it will end like that, so people decided to support him, even in the most desperate for the protest time, and went to the streets. That was the last big protest demonstration in Russia, January 2021.
Navalny's arrest and imprisonment has unleashed the greatest wave of anti-Putin sentiment in recent years. At least 4,000 people have now been detained at rallies across the country.
So I was part of that. And because of this, I had this second criminal case. So when I had to make a decision, the apartment where I was surrounded by political police. So I had to change my clothes into uniform of delivery and use the back door to the building. Then, with the help of my friends and my close people, I went to the car, which brought me to Belarus, the country which is a close neighbor to Russia. And from there were 3 attempts to cross the border with European Union, and the third one I made.
And I've heard you talk in the past about how a country is not turned into a fascist state over one day or even one event, that it's a slow, patient, painful process of getting people used to living a certain way. Can you tell me about some of the ways you saw that happen in your own country?
Well, I think first thing what happened with me, my 2 years prison term, because I was quite surprised. Pussy Riot been first artists, activists who were imprisoned for peaceful actions.
It was an act of protest by 3 young women, but a protest that set them against both church and state in a system effectively controlled by one man, Vladimir Putin. The 3 members of the punk rock band Pussy Riot were unsurprisingly found guilty of hooliganism by a Moscow court today.
But then Putin started to repress more and more people. There are public showcases when they take people from this or that circle, create a criminal case, and then create a huge media attention around this criminal case and imprison person for huge amount of years with a big propaganda coverage. So it scares people from this or that community or circle, and people start to censor themselves. Also, repressive laws like a law about foreign agents or people who just have a different views start to be named as foreign agents or unwanted people or organizations. It's legal terms. It's not just like unpleasant words. And if you do not follow the rules of the law when you've been named as foreign agent, you will be imprisoned. Also, political assassinations, murder, for example, of Boris Nemtsov, who was the loudest voice against the war and against Russian invasion to Ukraine in 2014, banning first mass demonstrations, then banning single demonstrations, then ban even any sign of the demonstration, wherever online or offline, and punishing people with big prison terms for that.
A lot of Putin's power relies on convincing people that resistance is impossible. When Pussy Riot first began, what were you trying to awaken in other Russians? How do you break that belief that change will never come?
When Pussy Riot started, there was a large protest movement across Russia. So only in Moscow, there were 100,000 people on streets shouting, "We are the power."
It's being called Russia's political awakening, and it's happening on a massive scale. For the first time in years, people are out in force to challenge the country's leaders.
And first action of Pussy Riot, which I participated in the Red Square, the Central Square in Moscow, was the song "Putin Pissed His Pants." And that was like an ironical comment to a reality when Putin was completely lost and didn't understand what to do because of so-called elections, upcoming elections happening in several months. And people here and there protesting against him, which didn't happen before. So Pussy Riot started as a part of this protest. And then again, we've been imprisoned for 2 years, but Putin was basically raping our country for many years. People start to leave the country. People start to be afraid. Many people are not alive anymore because of the fact that they put their lives to this protest. And I personally tried to just say my no to this dictatorship as a person, as Pussy Riot member, as activist.
Are you seeing that type of creep into kleptocracy in other places around the world, America, for instance?
Yes. Trump is copy-pasting Putin's methods a lot. And I think he is not hiding that. This so-called idea of strong leader man is somehow became very attractive.
Coming up, how the rise of Putin serves as a warning for democracies everywhere. Masha, the war against Ukraine has now been going for more than 4 years. Tell me about the impact that you're seeing and hearing that it's having in Russia. Is it making people in Russia angry at Putin, or is it making people in Russia angry at Ukraine?
Russian people are living under the military censorship. They're not able to express any opinion. For showing Ukrainian flag, you can get 8 years of prison. For calling the war, you can get the same amount of years in prison. And people are constantly murdered inside prison. Even like in this situation, there are several thousand people who are behind bars, including on life terms, because of protesting against this war. Because of this situation, people simply afraid to express anyhow their opinion. This is quite naive to think that in these conditions, after 2 decades of repressions and Putin's dictatorship, Russian people will just out of nowhere somehow get the weapons and make a revolution inside the country. There are high-top politicians and political parties in the West who collaborate with current Putin's regime for many years and feeding this regime and helping this regime to stay in power and kill Ukrainians. So from what I know and from people whom I know and who are still in the country, yes, people are against this war, but they are silent because they don't want to die. And if the question is like, do they associate this war with current regime, or they believe what propaganda is saying, that there are only Nazis in Ukraine and this is like in Second World War when brave Russian army is fighting Nazis? No. People are not idiots. But people do have fear, like everywhere.
Do you think that this kleptocracy in Russia will end when Putin goes or dies, or are the conditions still going to remain in Russia for this sort of oppression to continue on beyond him?
It's personal dictatorship. So he runs this machine. So if somebody have balls to kind of basically arrest or shot him from the West, definitely it will help. But Putin is the product of a machine of repressions. Russia being created as Russia just 30 years ago. Before it was a century of Soviet Union, totalitarian regime, which was not reflected because there was no time for freedom of speech and freedom of expression to reflect about what happened during basically the whole 20th century. There were more than 5 million people killed and sent to prison camps for nothing. Not only like for expressing opinion, but for basically nothing. And before that, there was like many centuries of monarchy. So this is quite heavy legacy. And he's a product of the system.
Masha, you said that everything is political, even doing nothing, choosing to do or say nothing is political, and that it's a choice to be indifferent or apathetic, and it means that you're essentially voting for the status quo. Are you concerned that there's a growing apathy across the world that is allowing authoritarianism to take hold both in the East and in the West?
Yeah, you're very right about indifference, growing indifference, and there is reason why. People have limits of suffer, let's say, and empathy. So with current news of catastrophe, wars, political raids like torture, people were quite overwhelmed and they do not believe that they can change anything. Another thing, which is much deeper in my opinion, many people in the West just used to live under democracy, and somehow subconsciously they think that this is something basic, this is something which exists by default, and just things will stay like they are. But it's basically not true, because things which been achieved by previous generations been achieved with the fight, and many people died for these values and for this freedoms which their grandchildren, like people now in the West, have. If people forget that and just chill in comfortable, wealthy kind of conditions, like they don't care and they don't think that it's necessary to fight for what you believe.
Well, Masha, thank you for speaking with us on 7am. It's been an honour. Thank you.
You too.
Masha Alyokhina is the author of Riot Days and Political Girl, Life and Fate in Russia, and is currently in Australia for the Festival of Dangerous Ideas. She'll appear at Killing Culture at Carriage Works in Sydney this Saturday, and in Pussy Riot's Political Girl at Carriage Works this Sunday. Also in the news, Israel's ambassador to Australia has accused Australia of harbouring a lot of haters of Israel after the federal government condemned Israel's handling of the investigation into the killing of Australian aid worker Zomi Frankom. Foreign Minister Penny Wong summoned the ambassador after Israel decided not to pursue criminal charges over the 2024 strikes that killed Frankom and 6 other World Central Kitchen workers travelling in a humanitarian convoy through Gaza. Australia says serious questions remain over the 3 strikes and Israel's refusal to provide key evidence, with Wong saying the government will consult Frankom's family before announcing further steps. And former South Australian Chief Justice Chris Kourakis has been appointed to lead Victoria's Royal Commission into corruption and serious misconduct on major government construction projects. The inquiry will examine alleged organised crime infiltration and whether governments, contractors and agencies failed in their oversight, with former Premiers Daniel Andrews and Jacinta Allen among those expected to be called. Victorian Premier Ben Carroll says nothing is off limits, with the Commission due to report by August next year. I'm Daniel James. Thanks for listening to 7am. We'll be back tomorrow.